Okay, so we're going to look at the odds for next season. Let's start with the Chiefs. They are the betting favorite to win at plus 700. Brady, how do you feel about the Kansas City Chiefs and these odds?
I mean, they're my favorite. It makes the most sense. I think when you're looking at the criteria for any team and heading into the future and what's going to allow them to be successful, do you have a quarterback? They do. They've got Patrick Mahomes. They have one of the best coaches in the NFL, Andy Reid, box checked. Travis Kelce's still there. Tyreek Hill's still there. Now, they do have a number of players who are going to become unrestricted free agents, so they have some work to do on their roster. That being said, they've been to the AFC Championship game the last 4 years. I feel really confident in saying this team should be the favorite to win it all, considering the pieces that they have intact. However, again, some work to do on this roster, although really none of these pieces you're saying outside of maybe Tyrann Mathieu or Orlando Brown, making sure you have some protection there for Patrick Mahomes. Do you feel like you're in dire need that, you feel like you can't live without and you can't find potentially in free agency or in the draft? So to me, the Kansas City Chiefs are still the favorite to win the Super Bowl next year.
Bills right behind them at plus 750. I mean, I think we always ask ourselves if those overtime rules had been different. How do you feel about the Bills at plus 750?
They would be up there too. I think the biggest question becomes, what's the damage done by Brian Daboll, their offensive coordinator for the past 4 years, moving on to become the head coach of the New York Giants? That's really the biggest question. The good thing for Josh Allen is Ken Dorsey gets elevated now to be the play caller and the OC. He had the passing game coordinator title last year, and he's been the quarterback coach now there for the past 3 years. So the big thing is there shouldn't be a huge transition for Ken Dorsey, or from Ken Dorsey to Ken Dorsey for Josh Allen. So at the end of the day, we should expect to have the same. I think this team continues to build and get better. They'll be right there in contention. But there is that question of if there's going to be any drop-off from losing the play caller.
We are seeing a lot of coaches moving around, including with the Rams as well. But let's talk about the Rams, not the betting favorite to repeat because they're 10-1 odds. They're third right now. Todd, they have a chunk of players that are headed to free agency. What do you think about these odds for the Rams?
They do, Amanda, and I think this is a buyer beware. If you're looking for the Rams to repeat at 10-1, this is not a price that I'd get anywhere near in terms of tying my money up for north of 300 days. Well, we saw that OBJ has the torn ACL. I'm not sure he was going to fit into the Rams' plan going forward anyways. You're talking about the potential retirement of Andrew Whitworth, but the biggest absence and a storyline that we're going to follow until he makes a decision will be Aaron Donald. If he's not there to anchor that defensive line, that is a massive hole to fill, because when you look at this Rams team, they never placed an emphasis on getting great linebacker play. They had a patchwork secondary that was held together by spitting bubblegum into that fourth quarter of the game yesterday against the Bengals. And there are some real concerns about their philosophies, knowing that they mortgage the future to win now. I'm not going to take anything away from what they accomplished. The goal is to win a Super Bowl, but the Rams aren't constructed to have that longevity. Matthew Stafford should have his work cut out for him on the offensive side. And I think a price at 10-1 with a franchise in transition, not a number that I'm getting anywhere near at this point.
Yeah, they said they were all in. It worked out for the one season. Not sure about the one to follow. Okay, coming in with the fourth best odds, the 49ers, Larry. I mean, you get questions of quarterback. Mike McDaniel's now with the Dolphins there. What do you feel about that price for the 49ers?
Yeah, that's pretty aggressive for a team that's going to be breaking in Trey Lance, who only had 2 starts. I mean, Deebo Samuel says he's going to be a superstar. I think he will be a superstar at some point. He's an explosive runner and an explosive passer, but he's so inexperienced. It is nice for him that pretty much the rest of the roster is intact. They have to sign Tomlinson, the guard, Quan Williams, the slot corner, but most of the key pieces are back, although they do lose Mike McDaniel. I just think to have them tied for the 4th lowest odds with Trey Lance taking over is just too low for me.
Okay, let's go to the Bengals right after that because they have the same odds, also 14-1. Of course, they did make it to the Super Bowl. As I mentioned at the beginning of the season, they were 150-1 to win the Super Bowl. That didn't quite happen. I'm sure Pete Prisco is going to change what he said, that maybe the Bengals weren't going to win the Super Bowl. They were just going to make it. I don't know. But what do you think about this?
Well, I mean,
he just always has to be right.
Yeah, he does. Look at this group of unrestricted free agents, though. Now, Jesse Bates is most likely to get the franchise tag at a minimum, if not an extension. The rest, I mean, C.J. Uzomah's been a good player for them. Maybe they find a way of signing him back. Eli Apple, depending on who you are, seems to get a lot of blame for things. But he played pretty well this year. Maybe they sign him back, or maybe after he goes out in free agency, he ends up coming back to the team for another shot at it. But the reality is this team is all based around Joe Burrow. The only concern I think you have right now if you're a Bengals fan is his knee. He was grabbing it during this game. We don't know necessarily the extent to that injury or if it could linger into next year. Hoping that everything's going to be fine, this will be a team that will be able to contend for Super Bowls It really just depends on how they continue to build around them. Clearly, their offensive line's an issue. We saw that in the second half of this game, but they've got plenty of talent at wide receiver, and I think it's just building up that defense now too to continue to take the ball away and get the ball back to Joe Burrow. The other thing you have to take into account, you're going to have a better chance of winning the Super Bowl if you're the number one overall seed, or at least win your division so you can host a home game. You look at the AFC North, it's a tough division, but no Big Ben in Pittsburgh, transition there. Have we seen really the ceiling for Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens? And then with Baker Mayfield and the Browns, what does that roster look like after kind of taking a step back last year? So the Bengals look to be the favorite right now, but they should be in at least contention for it to win a Super Bowl.
Baker has to come back healthy as well, undergoing surgery. Packers, 15-1 odds. Very curious. We don't know if we're going to have Aaron Rodgers. Devontae Adams is set to become a free agent there. Bad cap salary situation.
It has to be baked into these odds right now that they're expecting him potentially to sign back, or they might improve slightly once he would be potentially signed to an extension like the Packers have floated out there. That seems to be more of a tactic, though, by the front office to maybe say, hey, we offered him something. He was a back-to-back MVP for the past 2 years. It's not like we just let him walk out. We gave him an unbelievable offer. He chose not to take it so they can look good. But the reality is they're going to have to get rid of some pieces on defense, potentially Preston Smith and Zadarius Smith. They're going to have to sign Jair Alexander, Rashawn Gary to extensions. They got to figure out Devontae Adams. It is a mess. And then it's whether or not Aaron Rodgers wants to even come back to this team, or if he wants to go play somewhere else. So the reality is, you don't lay a bet here. You wait and see what happens. You get more clarity with all of it. You'll still get plus odds. Maybe it goes down a little bit, but too risky for me right now.
Todd, what do you think about the Cowboys behind them with 16-1 odds? I mean, they haven't been to a Super Bowl since 1995. I feel like, okay, they make it to the playoffs and then they lose a game and then they're out immediately. For those Cowboys fans watching, what do you think, Todd? 16-1 for the Cowboys.
I mean, this would be one of the logical choices. You keep waiting for them to make the ascent in the NFC. That's more wide open going into the 2022 season than ever before, given the defections of a lot of veteran quarterbacks, especially through the NFC South. Brady talked about Aaron Rodgers' uncertain status in Green Bay. If Dallas can't step up now, then when, you have to ask yourself. You have the pieces on the offensive side of the ball with your franchise quarterback and Dak Prescott. The running back situation remains muddled. I still think Tony Pollard gives them more explosion than Ezekiel Elliott at this point in his career. But we're going to have to see how the receiver position ends up working itself out. Cedric Wilson, a free agent, all sorts of talk about Amari Cooper that could have potentially played his last game as a member of the Cowboys, which will force CeeDee Lamb to step into that number one role, something he's more than capable of doing. But you look at Dallas on the defensive side as well, and I think one of their top concerns needs to be addressing that pass rush. Randy Gregory will be a free agent as well. And we saw this group overachieve for stretches. They have a bona fide star in the middle in Micah Parsons they can build around, and they play in a division where they should be prohibitive favorites for years to come. But until we see Dallas get over that hump, can you really advocate for betting them as one of these favorites in the NFC? I can't do it with Mike McCarthy at the helm. I think they're the class of the NFC East, but that may still be their ceiling at this point.
What about the Bucs, Larry? They come behind the Cowboys, 18-1 odds to win the Super Bowl next year. No more Tom Brady. Chris Godwin headed to free agency. They sort of did what the Rams did, and now we're seeing the fall off from that. What do you think about these odds for them, Larry?
Yeah, I mean, are they going to start Kyle Trask? He was the second-round pick last year, but he was inactive for every single game. He says he learned a lot. He did lead the nation with 43 touchdown passes at Florida, but there's some questions about his mobility and his release. He doesn't have the strongest arm. He is very accurate and very tough. I think they probably will give him a chance unless they go out and sign somebody like Jameis Winston, but you're talking about no Tom Brady, no Chris Godwin. You're talking about Ndamukong Suh and Jason Pierre-Paul, who are among the key free agents. A lot of age on this roster as you look at the list right there. 18-1, way too low for me to invest in Tampa Bay.
So Super Bowl 56 is done, which means we're totally done with it, and we're just looking ahead to 365 days later. Odds to win a Super Bowl 57. So we've gone through the first batch. Now we're looking at these teams. The Titans all the way through the Seahawks there. The Titans, they do have the coach of the year. Maybe the Broncos. Could they end up with Aaron Rodgers? Not really sure. Would you put any money on some of these teams? All right, let's welcome back in our guys, and let's start with the Titans. As I mentioned, Mike Vrabel winning coach of the year. The first time a Titans coach has ever won that award. Congratulations to them. 20-1 odds, Brady Quinn to win the Super Bowl next year.
I love this bet as it currently stands for a number of reasons. One, Vrabel hasn't had a losing season since he's been there. If you look at the construct of this roster, It's built to win. They're in an awful division, the AFC South, so it's easy for them to potentially once again get the number 1 seed. And they did that with Ryan Tannehill. And I think if he can improve his play in the playoffs, they could find their way into a Super Bowl. But the reason why I really love the odds as it currently stands is because they might get Aaron Rodgers. If you place money on the Titans now, this thing is only going to skyrocket potentially to the top, if not one of the top teams in the entire NFL to win the Super Bowl next year. So right now, if you get in, you're getting extreme value, in my opinion, given the fact that there's only one of a few things Aaron Rodgers may do. And if he is leaving Green Bay, it's Tennessee or it's Denver. And I think Tennessee is the easier path to a Super Bowl, given how easy that AFC South division is. So this is a very, very money shot for me, I think, if you want to place a long-term bet and look at next year's Super Bowl.
We'll look at the Broncos here in a second, but let's go to the Ravens next. They began this season with the 5th highest odds to win the Super Bowl. They didn't even make it to the playoffs. Same odds as the Titans, Todd, 20-1 for the Ravens.
This team is extremely interesting for a variety of reasons. They dealt with a rash of injuries at a lot of key positions. We knew about the running back depth that was going to be tested even before the season started, and it seemed like down the stretch there was another defensive back that got hurt, another defensive back, and they really had to cobble together a secondary that acquitted itself quite nicely as best they could. The real question that you have to ask with the Baltimore Ravens is, do they believe Lamar Jackson can be the guy to get them over the hump? We know Lamar wasn't healthy down the stretch, but will he continue to go through in his development, not only as a pocket passer, but show some of those wrinkles that makes him one of the more dynamic playmakers under center? With a return of a healthy J.K. Dobbins, instantly that backfield gets upgraded. You look at the receiving group with Mark Andrews and getting a guy like Rashad Bateman that's now had a year in the system, going to be a massive improvement as well. The big question I have is for the Ravens defensively. I'm not sure Calais Campbell fits into their plans going forward, whether it's retirement or they let him walk with free agency, but getting a guy like Marcus Peters back will only help. But Brady brought this point up earlier in regards to the Cincinnati Bengals and one of the issues they would face. This division, in my opinion, is a lot better than people give them credit for if the Steelers go out and address their big black hole at the quarterback position. If not, I think we're talking about Baltimore, Cleveland, and Cincinnati beating each other up to be atop the heap in the AFC North.
Brady, you love the Titans odds there with the chance that they could potentially end up with Aaron Rodgers. Broncos, as you mentioned, same position there. A little bit longer shot, 22-1 odds.
Yeah, same thing. They're the other team in contention for Aaron Rodgers, so they get him great. This is a roster, again, that's built to win with the proper quarterback behind center. You look at the wide receivers, they've got playmakers. They've got the backfield, too, to add some balance to the rushing attack to that offense. Nathaniel Hackett, well, that's his former offensive coordinator, so there could be some continuity there in the offense. And defensively, they've got some stars. We saw Pat Surtain, the rookie, was phenomenal this year. Bradley Chubb, he can impact games off of the edge. So they're built to compete within the AFC West. The tough thing is it's a really tough division to win. You obviously have to deal with the Kansas City Chiefs, Chargers, and the Raiders, who are a playoff team this past year. So that's the only reason why I say it's a little bit more difficult path. But again, with Aaron Rodgers at quarterback, a guy who's been MVP for the past 2 years, these odds will dramatically improve. So again, if you're a little bullish on the Broncos, or maybe there's the chance of landing Aaron Rodgers, now's the time to strike on this bet.
Todd, let me ask you the same thing. Yeah, go ahead.
No, you guys brought it up. I mean, this is a team that's going to see a massive shakeup in terms of its odds if Aaron Rodgers becomes their starting quarterback next year. Now, the road to getting out of the AFC West isn't exactly easy. Playing Patrick Mahomes twice, the Chargers team with Justin Herbert, and we'll see what the Raiders elect to do with a change in coaching personnel there. But this is a team that checks every box from a roster standpoint. It's a team I was actually bullish on coming into this year with Teddy Bridgewater under center. So if you're trying to forecast what those odds would look like, the Broncos at 22-1 now, for me, I would make them 10-1 and put them only behind the Chiefs and Bills in the AFC and make them the third favorite overall, because I really believe in the construction of this roster. I think the biggest question you'd have is the head coaching position, just given the inexperience there, but Aaron Rodgers would potentially bridge that gap given the familiarity those two would have with one another.
I should mention this too, even if it's not Aaron Rodgers, clearly Denver is in the market for a quarterback. And so it could be another veteran quarterback who's looking at uprooting, getting out from where he's at. With what we've seen in the Super Bowl the past 2 years, a quarterback who's left this team, gone somewhere else, won a Super Bowl that first year, you better believe there's other veteran guys who are saying, I can do the same thing. Maybe if Kyler Murray doesn't like being in Arizona, given that the Super Bowl's there next year, someone's like, that looks like a pretty good roster to me. I'd gladly go to the Arizona Cardinals and try to have a chance to play a Super Bowl in my home stadium.
I love that we're all reading into social media and following and unfollowing people. We're going to talk about the Cardinals here in a second and see what you think. There are a handful of teams with 25-1 odds. Larry, let's start with you talking about the Patriots. No more Josh McDaniels, but they do got a Mac Jones.
Yeah, seems like a lot of value, 25-1. You have the quarterback in place. You must re-sign J.C. Jackson, the shutdown corner, and you've got to get help on the other side. The Bills prove that the other cornerback spot is a weak spot. It is a tough division, but I think if you address cornerback and then give Mac Jones some receivers, I mean, Kendrick Bourne, Jacoby Myers, you see he is a free agent. These are not number one receivers. Nelson Aguilar, you need a number one receiver. Is it Jamison Williams out of Alabama? Let's see if Bill Belichick and company can finally make the right choice and get a stud wideout.
We were just talking about the Cardinals, and here is where we find them. Same odds as the Patriots. They would become the third team in a row to play in their home stadium because, of course, the Super Bowl is in Arizona next year. As Brady mentioned, we have the drama with Kyler Murray. Don't know what's going on there. A handful of guys headed to free agency, including Zach Ertz, who says he wants to stay there. 25-1 odds. Todd, what do you think about the Cardinals here?
You know, honestly, Amanda, with or without Kyler Murray under center, this isn't a number that intrigues me whatsoever because when you're talking about franchise stability, let's not kid ourselves. The Arizona Cardinals aren't exactly the poster child for that. And for them to try and quell some of these distractions involving Kyler Murray, I think this is a harbinger for what the season could look like going forward. We've seen from Cliff Kingsbury, he got the team to overachieve at least through the first 2 months of this season, but time and time again, he fails to make adjustments. And whether it was his time in Lubbock at Texas Tech or his tenure so far with the Arizona Cardinals, they tail off when the games start to matter more. And we see it with the elite head coaches and the better quarterbacks in the league. You spend the months of September and October figuring out what you have, and you really hit stride in November and December. Arizona has kind of gone in a different direction, and I really believe this is a stock you could look to short because if Kyler Murray's situation continues to linger much longer, I really believe things will get out of control. And oftentimes, where there's smoke, there's fire. I'd be selling Arizona Cardinals stock going into next season.
Todd does not like those odds with the Cardinals. It is the same odds that we have for the Chargers to win Super Bowl 57. They did not tie the Raiders to make it to the postseason. They have now not been to the playoffs since 2008. There is Justin Herbert there, so that's great. What do you think about the Chargers, Brady?
Well, look, they've got a quarterback in Justin Herbert. We know he can take over games, how special he is. And they've got a talented roster. It's just a matter of them whether or not they can stay healthy. That's part of it. It is a tough division. We keep saying that with the AFC West, and that's really a tougher path, obviously, to make it. However, we did see a surprise team this year in the Cincinnati Bengals, fighting their way to win the AFC North and finding their way through the playoffs to then play in the Super Bowl. So who's to say that the Los Angeles Chargers can't be that team that's able to do that with the talent and personnel that they have? So I'm a little bit more bullish on them. I think if you're a really big believer in Justin Herbert and the fact that this team can get over the hump and with this aggressive style of play from Brandon Staley where they'll pretty much go for a fourth down no matter where they're at, then maybe you should lay a little money on them right now. Because, again, as we get closer to the season, as they continue to go through the offseason, they have done a good job of kind of stacking and building this team out around Herbert and even on the defensive side of the ball. I think these odds could potentially only go down.
The last team we have at 25-1. Larry, I want to know if the Colts interest you at all here. They could not beat the Jags to make it to the postseason. Most recent reports, it's not looking great for Carson Wentz there. What do you feel about the Colts, Larry? 25-1 odds.
I feel less than ambivalent. I mean, Carson Wentz did everything wrong for the Colts, and he played too much, so now they have to give up a first-round pick, and he played so badly down the stretch. They lose at home to the Raiders. They lose at Jacksonville. Now they might trade him. They might release him. They have the worst pass rush in the entire league. What are they going to do at quarterback? I think this should be 35-1 in all honesty.
All right, 35-1. We're just going to skip all over it. Let's go to the Vikings, who now have a Super Bowl winning head coach in Kevin O'Connell there. They are plus 3,000. Todd, does this interest you at all?
Well, I'm surprised with all the shade that Larry threw in the direction of the Indianapolis Colts, because if they do address the quarterback spot, I really believe this team could be a little bit of a dark horse and get over the hump that held them back this year, knowing you can build around guys like Jonathan Taylor and Darius Leonard. But the Minnesota Vikings at 30-1 are a team that intrigues me a ton. I know Kirk Cousins will draw the ire of his fan base, and a lot of people say he can't possibly win the big game. But when you look at the way that this roster is constructed offensively, there may not be a team that has better skill position talent than what Minnesota can throw out there when you're talking about Dalvin Cook and Justin Jefferson. Now, the quarterback situation, a little bit disconcerting, but the reality of it is you now have an offensive-minded head coach in Kevin O'Connell that takes over, and so much of what we've seen from the Rams in the past has been operating off of play action. That's where Kirk Cousins is at his absolute best. The situation I want to see unfold is on the defensive side of the ball, where you're going to be going through a little bit of a change in philosophy, moving most likely to a 3-4 with Ed Donatel coming in, taking that over. Patterson leaves the post, so I think the Vikings probably don't have a great opportunity to convince Danielle Hunter this is where he needs to be playing football, learning a new scheme going forward. So it wouldn't shock me at all if he was on the trade block so they could bring in players that'll fit their style. But the reality for me is I think Minnesota, especially if Aaron Rodgers is to bolt for greener pastures, becomes the front runner in the division. And at 30-1, I think this is a team that if they're able to win close games that they squandered countless opportunities in doing this year, can really be a dark horse in the NFC in what should be a wide open conference.
Larry, you absolutely hated the Colts 25-1. I want to see what you think about the Saints at 35-1, a new head coach. Not sure about your quarterback situation. They're so far over the salary cap, it doesn't really exist to them at that point. What do you think about these odds, Larry?
Yeah, over 70 million over the cap. And Jameis Winston, I mean, they started 5-2 with him. He had 14 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. The question is he going to give them a big discount because he did revitalize his career there? Is he going to go back? And if that's the case, then this has maybe an outside shot. But if you're talking about Taysom Hill at quarterback and you're talking about all the dead money that they have to get off their books, this could be a total rebuild if they don't get Jameis Winston back. So no, not interested right now.
Something that could be a rebuild, something I'm not. I don't even know what to think about the Seahawks at this point. Todd, help us with this. 40-1.
Yeah, I mean, this is a team that can go multiple different directions. Of course, the big storyline that we'll follow here is regarding their starting quarterback in Russell Wilson as well. I know he's reaffirmed his commitment to winning in Seattle, but let's see if that holds true. I think if you're the Seahawks, you have to try and go out there and see if there are teams that are actually interested in acquiring Russ, what that trade chip looks like. And the Buccaneers have been a team that's widely rumored to be very interested in trying to bring in another veteran quarterback, obviously, in the wake of Tom Brady's retirement. On the offensive side, they struggled, obviously, without Russell Wilson. Skill position-wise, I think there are some question marks that have to be answered. But DK Metcalf and Chris Carson give you a bona fide 1-2 punch. The offensive line has always been a weak spot for as long as Russell Wilson has been there. And you look at the landscape in the division. If Trey Lance takes over in San Francisco, Arizona isn't quite sure if Kyler Murray will be their guy, although I suspect he will be, and a Rams team that won't quite look the same. Maybe Seattle can really resurrect things from a season that got away from them early. Meanwhile, on the other side, this defense leaves a lot to be desired. It's Clint Hurt and Sean Desai that are going to be tasked with the reclamation project here. The trade for Jamal Adams continues to haunt them, given the steep price they gave up to try and acquire a guy who's a glorified blitzer and doesn't offer much in coverage. The Seahawks at 40-1. In the 60-1 range, okay, I'd be intrigued, but at 40-1, I don't want no part of betting this team this far out.
So you tell me they got a chance, though, Todd? Is that what you're telling me right now? They've got a chance?
Brady, everybody's got a chance, my friend. If the Bengals can come from off the pace at 150-1 and the Rams could do it 20 years ago, you got a Hall of Famer. Russell Wilson can mask a lot of those deficiencies.
These are some of the longer shots. Bengals 150-1 to win the Super Bowl in the 2021 preseason. Get those bets in now as we check out the longer odds for teams 19 through 28. And giving us their thoughts on the odds, 364 days from the next championship game. Brady Quinn, Todd Fuhrman. And
not too early is what you're saying?
Not too early, no. No, we're recording all of this, so all of this stuff is going to come back to haunt you at some point. A lot of people thought that the Cleveland Browns would be a contender in 2021. 16-1 to win the Super Bowl in the preseason. They were not even close to that, and they're a little more realistic at 40-1 to win Super Bowl 57, Larry. What do you think about Cleveland at this point in time?
I think we could have another AFC North story going all the way to the Super Bowl. You know, Baker Mayfield got hurt in week 2, and they probably should have benched him, but they kept playing him, and he was terrible. 26 in passer rating, 17 touchdowns against 13 picks. But let's remember, in Kevin Stefanski's first year, 26 touchdowns, 8 picks, and this team won 11 games and looked like a real contender. I think as long as Baker Mayfield is healthy, and they address the wide receiver position with somebody like a Garrett Wilson from Ohio State, because we could be looking at Jarvis Landry departing, and there really aren't any great wideout threats. I think if those two things happen, this team could be in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, a lot of pressure on Baker Mayfield coming into the 2022 season. Eagles head coach Nick Sirianni made it to the postseason in his first year as head coach, and we had some promising play from Jalen Hurts, but there are now rumors about possibly Russell Wilson going to Philadelphia. They're also at 40-1, Todd. What do you make of the Eagles situation right now?
Yeah, I think this is a team that desperately has to address the quarterback spot, and this isn't a dig at Jalen Hurts because he did the best with what he could and what he was surrounded by all season long. But I'm not sure he's the guy that gets the team over the hump from the improbable playoff appearance that they had this year. I look at the construction of this Eagles roster. We know they're a little bit limited as far as the wide receivers position is concerned, but they got the most out of a less than talented group other than Devontae Smith. From a ground game standpoint, Miles Sanders capable of being a bell cow if he's able to stay healthy. But this will be a team that Nick Sirianni has to figure out. Is Jalen Hurts his answer for next season going forward, or are they going to continue to address the quarterback need this offseason, like you mentioned? As far as the defense, they were dealt a little bit of a lifeline with Jonathan Gannon returning as their defensive coordinator. It's a group that lacks some of that big play potential, adopting that bend but don't break type philosophy. We'll see what they're able to do next year as Gannon has a better idea of what he's got in his personnel. The reality for me is that this is a team who plays in a division where there is upside to potentially be division champs, but I think them getting into the divisional playoff is probably the ceiling. I'd want no part of backing them at this current number.
Oh, they've got a little bit of money to spend. I mean, $22 million in cap space, so they do have some spending money for them to go out into the market. Miami, let's talk about Miami. Boy, oh boy, still embroiled in offseason stuff. You just heard about Stephen Ross possibly losing the team if the allegations against him are proven true for the $100,000 offering to Brian Flores for losses. I mean, it is a mess in Miami, but their odds also at 40-1, a little bit worse than last season, 35-1. Not a huge drop, but a drop nonetheless, Larry. They do have a lot of money, the most cap space in the NFL heading into the offseason at $64 million.
Yeah, and I think Mike McDaniel is going to do well. This guy is the architect of the brilliant run game we saw out with the 49ers. George Kittle said he never wanted to play for any other team than had Mike McDaniel as a coach. So he's a brilliant guy. And they only average 4.8 yards per play, and they just need to upgrade that offensive line. They had the worst offensive line in all of football, but they do have money to spend if they invest on the offensive line with the new offensive scheme. The defensive talent, I believe, is still there. I think this team could surprise. I'm not saying they're going to make the Super Bowl, but I do think they could be a wild card.
And of course, Tua Tagovailoa, guy, another we talk about Baker Mayfield and that situation with him, with the Dolphins also having some pressure on Tua Tagovailoa. There was talk about Deshaun Watson at some point. That's kind of cooled off a bit, so it's going to be interesting to see what happens in Miami with the quarterback position. Speaking of that, what about the Raiders with Derek Carr? Actually had a pretty decent season if you consider what they had to deal with early on, the John Gruden situation. They made it to the postseason under interim head coach Rich Bisaccia. Now Josh McDaniels comes in, and the Raiders are 50-1. Now, Todd, if there's a team on the back end of this list that might be primed for a breakout in 22, could it be the Raiders?
If they played in any other division, I would probably make a case for them being a realistic long shot to emerge from a heap of teams in this similar price range. The problem being for them is that if Denver does anything at the quarterback spot, getting through the Chargers, the Broncos, and the Chiefs will be an uphill battle. And you look at this Raiders team, they exceeded everyone's expectations this past season. Their win total coming into the year was 7, and they look like they were down and out right around Thanksgiving time until they were able to upset the Cowboys as more than a touchdown underdog. And they rode the wave of a defense that overachieved because the offense really lacked playmakers. I think Derek Carr gets a rough rap given what he's been surrounded by for years in Vegas and, of course, Oakland before that. There aren't a lot of difference makers on this roster. And a credit to Rick Bisaccia and what he was able to do holding this team together with so many off-field issues that could have fractured this team at the seams. Dave Ziegler has his work cut out for him in terms of overhauling some of the personnel. I like some of the Patriot ties that we're going to see in place here with Josh McDaniels, then bringing over Mick Lombardi as his play caller most likely. Defensively, though, not a ton to get excited about. Max Crosby was kind of a revelation as far as generating a pass rush, but that defensive backfield needs to be completely overhauled. And I think the Raiders are going to go through a transition period, a shift in culture, and I worry about where this team is at. I'll probably be looking to bet them under their win total if that number comes out at all inflated.
Yeah, and some of those free agents, I mean, Jalen Richard, KJ Wright, Zay Jones, Nick Martin, guys that they have to look at in terms of unrestricted free agents heading into the offseason. All right, the Falcons 7-10, they have a top 10 pick in the draft. We don't know what the situation is with Calvin Ridley. Maybe they're looking at a trade there. That's what the rumor is. 60-1, but it looks like, I mean, Larry, minus $5.8 million in cap space. It looks like this is going to be another rebuilding year for the Falcons.
Yeah, they're stuck with Matt Ryan and his $48 million cap hit at age 36 in his 15th year. And yes, they were in the playoff hunt, but that was really a mirage. They were minus 146 in point differential. Only the New York Giants were worse in the NFC. And you talk about what they need. They need receivers. They need offensive line help. They need defensive line help. They need a cornerback out, opposite AJ Terrell. They need help pretty much everywhere on the roster. And Matt Ryan, at this point in his career, coming off a 20-touchdown season, one of his lowest ever, is not in position to carry this team. It's really a bad spot for the Falcons because they really should start the rebuild. Falcons
at 60-1. Another team joining them, the Washington football team, which is now the Commanders. Hey, at least they've got themselves a name heading into 2022. A ton of questions up and down this roster, though, Brady, not the least of which is the quarterback position. Their situation not really that much different from Atlanta at this point.
No, but in my opinion, they're a quarterback away from being able to be in contention for the NFC East, which gives you a leg up, gives you a shot. They do have some young pieces there. Obviously, Chase Young coming off the knee injury. They'll need him to come back in tip-top shape. But it's a tough defensive front to go up against. I think they've made strides. Offensively, it's a good O-line, and they do have pieces that are playmakers. Gibson in the backfield, McLaurin on the outside. So there is something there. We keep talking about Russell Wilson. We talked to him earlier about going to Philadelphia. What happens if you went to the Washington Commanders? That immediately takes this team, improves their odds of winning, and potentially gives them a shot at winning a Super Bowl because he's done it before. And I think he could create some plays, too, on off-scripted plays. We saw that from Taylor Heineke from time to time, just not quite enough. So the reality is, yes, this roster has some holes. It needs some pieces. But the truth of the matter is, if they got a guy like Russell Wilson, they can make it go, they can make a run.
$30 million in cap space. Fitzpatrick and Kyle Allen are both unrestricted free agents. And you see J.D. McKissick also on that list, and wide receiver Adam Humphries. All right, let's talk about the Pittsburgh Steelers finishing 9-7-1. They get a playoff game, but go out as Big Ben rides off into the sunset. They finish second to the Bengals in that division, but with Cleveland and Baltimore in there, it's looking like a tough year in Steeltown as they begin life after Big Ben, Todd.
It seems like a common trend that we're discussing for all these teams priced in that 30-1 range or greater. If they're able to address the gaping hole at quarterback, then they have a much better ceiling than the way things look right now, 364 days before they'll hand out next year's Lombardi Trophy. And the Pittsburgh Steelers fall right into that same bucket. Big Ben was a shell of himself in the final couple of years under center there. But now Pittsburgh's faced with a very tough decision because I don't believe that Mason Rudolph or Dwayne Haskins are their answer, not only for the long term, but even this season coming up. So what can they do? Do they want to get a veteran quarterback in there under center, or do they believe if a guy like Kenny Pickett with Pittsburgh ties, having played at the university right there, can fall to him and get them in a position to win football games immediately? Because you look at the offensive side, we know the O-line leaves a lot to be desired, but as far as skill position talent's concerned, I mean, this group is extremely talented. Chase Claypool and Deontay Johnson, a legitimate 1-2 punch. Najee Harris, a bell cow back that's going to be there for years. And you have a tight end in Pat Freiermuth that fits the mold of what the Steelers want to do. Defensively, this was a side of the ball that they really underachieved. There's plenty of star power there. Of course, highlighted by TJ Watt, who was the defensive player of the year. You're looking at the secondary. I don't think Minkah Fitzpatrick had a great season by his standards, but you are getting more and more out of Devin Bush when he's on the field. You'll be a little bit healthier along the defensive line. Pittsburgh's an intriguing team, but again, it's a division that's extremely difficult. And if they're going to go into battle with either a rookie or the current quarterback options they have on their roster, I think they're in store for a last place finish in the AFC North.
$32 million in cap space sitting there at 60-1. Let's go to 70-1 teams. And we're talking about the Carolina Panthers, a 5-win season marred by that revolving door at quarterback. I mean, we didn't really know what was going on there from week to week. And once again, no Christian McCaffrey for a good portion of the campaign. Matt Rule has plenty of challenges to face in his second season there, Larry.
Yeah, Todd mentioned a gaping hole at quarterback in Pittsburgh. I think this gaping hole is even bigger in Carolina. I mean, are you going to stick with Sam Darnold? I really hope not. I think at number 6 overall, you can go with the Ole Miss quarterback, Matt Corral, and build for the future. But will the owner be patient enough? They have no other picks in the top 100, and they need to address the offensive line. Sure, Christian McCaffrey should be healthy, but in today's day and age, the running back position not nearly as important as quarterback. So again, 5-11, 5-12 for Matt Rule. Is he even going to last to see the development of a young quarterback?
Chicago at 80-1. I'm not sure if Chris Hassel would be happy about that number or disappointed by that number.
He would say it's about right.
He'd probably say it's about right. Yeah, the Matt Eberflus era beginning in the Windy City. He says they're going to build this offense around Justin Fields. So, vote of confidence there for the youngster, although he did say we still have to evaluate him to see where his strengths are in terms of building it. The defense, one of the best in the league, top 6, but Vegas thinks they still have a long way to go here, Todd.
Well, I'm glad he said they're going to build around Justin Fields rather than making Darnell Mooney the face of this franchise going forward, because I'm not sure that would take them where they need to go. When you look at this Bears offense, Fields is going to be a little bit handcuffed. When you bring in a defensive-minded head coach, I think it's a curious decision when you have a young quarterback. You do want to see him continue to develop under center. And the good thing for Bears fans, we started to see chemistry and rapport with a big tight end target in Cole Kmet, who I think can have a breakout performance and really exceed expectations. But there's not a lot to get excited about on this offensive side of the ball. And when you look at the cap situation in Chicago, it's not exactly optimal either. This is a defense that's gotten by on reputation more than anything else. It's an aging unit that is a few years removed from that takeaway group that gave them an opportunity to make a deep run in the playoffs before they came up just a bit short against the Philadelphia Eagles. So I think Bear fans are going to have to keep realistic expectations. This is a team from top to bottom roster construction that even if the Packers were to lose Aaron Rodgers, I still don't think they're more talented than their neighbors to the north. 80-1, in my opinion, isn't high enough for a Bears team that's going to take a little while to figure out their identity, especially with a first-year head coach that, I'll be honest, guys, I thought was a bit of an enigmatic hire in Matt Eberflus, given that he played a largely vanilla defense when he was in charge in Indianapolis.
Well, you saw some of the names on their unrestricted free agent list there. Allen Robinson, Akeem Hicks, Jermaine Ifedi, Chris Jones, also guys that, they need to get and need to have on this team if they are going to do anything to get better than 80-1. Lastly here, the New York Giants, triple digit. Triple digit. Long shot parade. 100-1. Number of positions need to be addressed on both sides of the ball here, Brady, and negative cap space.
Yeah, and that's really what hurts them because, look, I don't think the roster, at least offensively speaking, is in that bad of a spot outside of their offensive line. Clearly, they need to do a better job protecting the quarterback, whether that's Daniel Jones or whoever else. So we can float out Russell Wilson, and obviously we know if he was to make your trade, work to get there, it would dramatically change their odds. But the truth of the matter is their skill players aren't that bad. I don't know if it's just a byproduct of the offensive system in which they were running last year, if it's Daniel Jones and too many turnovers, but they don't have faith or confidence in him, the protection, a combination of all of it. It could be any of those things, but they've got talent on that roster. It's about trying to maximize and get the most out of them and try to improve on the defensive side of the ball. Look, this is a long shot, but it's one in which if you lay some of this money now, if they happen to be in the Russell Wilson sweepstakes, I know there's talked a lot about Daniel Jones, but everyone talks really well about the quarterback they have in the roster until they ship him off somewhere else. If you could get Russell Wilson with Brian Daboll running the offense, I think that's going to dramatically improve their chances of making a run the NFC East, potentially to a Super Bowl. That's a big what if. And even if it's just Daniel Jones going into this year, I do think Brian Daboll will implement a system that's going to take away from some of those things that were putting Daniel Jones in a bad spot. The question is, what's their ceiling? I just don't think it's high enough for these odds. They should be more like 150, to 1 at this point, looking at where Daniel Jones has been the past few years.
The problem with the Bengals getting to the Super Bowl at 150-1 is now all
everyone
these teams,
thinks that, yeah.
Everybody thinks, it's like the Tom Brady thing. Everybody thinks you get a late round draft pick, you're going to hit the diamond in the rough. We are tracking the Super Bowl 57 odds. 364 days away from the 2022 title game. Here are teams 29 through 32. You have the Jaguars at 125-1, 150-1 for the Lions, 200-1 for the Texans, 200-1 for the Jets. Jaguars, by the way, 125-1 going into the 2021 season. They actually had better odds than the Bengals did. But we all know how it all turned out. Maybe they could make good on it this year. We've had Brady Quinn, Todd Fuhrman, Larry Hartstein from the Early Edge here to give us their thoughts on these odds and look at these teams. So we're moving on to that bottom four. We're grouping them together because, There's just a few dumpster fires in there. Jags, Lions, Texans, and Jets, they all have issues. If one of these teams gets close to a Super Bowl, I mean, this is going to be a major miracle, Brady.
Yeah, actually, I would say, if you want to do a magic trick, take $100, all right, you put on any one of these 4 teams, and you watch it a year from now, disappear, all right, because you'll never see that money ever again. Don't waste your money. You might be a fan of any one of these 4 teams. Do not place any wager on them. They're not winning a Super Bowl next year. That is a guarantee.
Yeah, I mean, Brady, I'm not going to argue with you for any of your assessments there. If I have to pick from this quartet of bottom feeders, I'd actually lean towards the Jets. I like some of what we saw from Zach Wilson down the stretch, an ongoing development process. We knew he was going to be a project, given the caliber of competition he faced at BYU, and you started to see him develop chemistry with a couple of the Jets' weapons on the roster. We'll see if he's able to take the next step when there are some expectations placed on him in his sophomore season. Defensively, let's not kid ourselves. The reason you're 200-1 is because you don't have a lot of talent on that side of the ball, specifically in the secondary. Let's see what Robert Salah can whip up in his second season. He disappointed me with a lot of his game management for extended stretches last year, but I know the first season as a head coach can be overwhelming. Maybe the Jets have a chance to flirt with 500, but 200-1 to win the Super Bowl, I'm with Brady. Probably not a bet that I'm running to make.
Yeah, I don't absolutely love it, but I mean, you got a Super Bowl winning coach in Jacksonville. You have a #1 overall pick, Trevor Lawrence, who should thrive under Doug Peterson. You have a ton of cap space. Maybe you add Chris Godwin. You get the #1 overall pick this year. Maybe you take Hutchinson out of Michigan with all those sacks. And pretty soon, in a weak division, you are looking at a playoff team in the Jacksonville Jaguars. It happened this year with the Bengals. Why not Jacksonville?
Larry, stop it. Stop it.
I'll take that bet.
All right, and because, we like to archive this stuff and then use it at a later date to make you guys look good, right?
Yeah.
That's what we always do. We make you
bad.
look good. We never use it to make you look bad, ever. Let's get a pick to win Super Bowl 57 in Arizona. Brady, start.
I mean, I'm going to go chalk as it is, Kansas City. I mean, they've been to 4 straight AFC Championship games. Why would I not go chalk at this point in time? The closer we get to the season, once the games start being played, that number's only going to go down from here. So if you're going to ask me to put my reputation on the line,
right.
Why would I pick anyone else at this point?
Good to see Brady really going out on a limb. I'm not sure if he's going to pick Alabama to win the national title in college football. Maybe he'll make a case for the Dodgers as well. But need I remind you, gentlemen, on this show 2 years ago, the day after the Super Bowl, I gave out Tampa Bay to win the World Series. It tells you what I'm thinking. To win the Lombardi Trophy. The reality of what I made my case with Jameis Winston under center. Not quite sure would have come to fruition then. I'll give you a pair of long shots here. Larry talked about one of them earlier in the Cleveland Browns. I think this is a team that had huge expectations going into last season. Now they can play a little bit more loose and free, hopefully with a roster that stays intact and a healthy quarterback. And I'll also make a slight case for the Minnesota Vikings. This is a team offensively that has a ton of firepower. They're in a division that could see them get uplifted by a removal of Aaron Rodgers from the equation. And I think the NFC is as wide open going into the year as it's ever been in the past. So I'll give you a pair of teams at 30 and 40-1.
Todd, I love the Browns as well. And Brady, you're right. The 7-1 on the Chiefs is actually the highest for a favorite since 2010. It has always been 600 or lower. So you're getting great value, and this will go down. 4 straight title games and an inexplicable second half away from being in the Super Bowl. You got to re-sign Orlando Brown, but most of the other key guys are coming back. It's all chalk, but I'll take the Chiefs.
Larry Hartstein, Todd Fuhrman, Brady Quinn discussing early odds for Super Bowl 57 here on the Football Happy Hour. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for hopping on. And, I don't want to say you're risking your reputation, but potentially risking your reputation as we head towards Super Bowl 57. Season's over. Let's go to the offseason. Thanks.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis. No yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.